Nothing's better than the public library, a true third place with bathrooms, air conditioning, and free books. And while you might stumble in for any number of reasons, books are the bread and butter for librarians. They want you returning again and again, whether it's for Carmen Maria Machado or Carson McCullers. And librarians have a few tricks up their sleeves to make sure you quickly realize that having fun isn't hard when you've got a library card. Because from historical fiction to short stories to true crime, librarians understand categories. They also understand that two categories can be related in some way, and they use that knowledge to get you in the door and keep you coming back week after week. Hi, I'm Sabrina Cruz, card-carrying patron of the library, and this is Study Hall, Real-World Statistics. My buddy Jose manages stock for 7 libraries in the town of Knockemstiff, where he's always dealing with funding issues. See, Knockemstiff City Council isn't convinced that the libraries have enough patrons to justify funding, a classic government approach to beloved public spaces. Jose knows the answer here is pretty clear. He needs some epic book displays that will suck new readers in as soon as they walk through the door, no matter which neighborhood they're in. And to do that, he has to get to the heart of both book genres and library users. When we're studying different categories of things, we usually want to know how often the data fall into those categories, which type of character is played most often in D&D, what's the top cheese people add to tuna casserole. Cheddar. Getting a handle on category frequencies like these is easy with a bar graph. Jose has relied on that in another episode using a chi-square goodness of fit test. That test measures exactly how different what we think is going to happen is from what actually happened using bars. But that works best when there's just one variable to work with. Jose's current problem is a bit different as he tries to curate the most reader-attracting display for each of his individual libraries. They're each in a different neighborhood with a different mix of users, and Jose suspects that there's probably a relationship between book genre and the users doing the borrowing, which will help him curate his displays. There's now 2 different variables in play, the kind of library user and the genre of books they check out. If we're looking at how pairs of categories fall across some population, we need a way of organizing that data that can handle both at the same time, so we can eventually test whether 2 categories of things are actually related in some way. Jose's hunch is that the frequency distribution of books across genres, the kind of books that people tend to borrow, will look different depending on the group of people doing the borrowing. He also knows that each of his 7 libraries sit in very different kinds of neighborhoods. Some have lots of retirees, or a bunch of students, or a bunch of tired educational video makers who just need some romantasy, dang it. Because of that, Jose also suspects that these different libraries will have different rates of borrowing across genres, too. To investigate his first hunch about library patrons and genres, he starts off with a look at the books borrowed in the largest library, Markov Meadow, using data from the previous month. At Markov Meadow, borrowers fall into categories. They're either children and teens, college students, or 4 categories of adults: adults, seniors, library staff, or library volunteers. Jose specifically wants to understand whether the frequency of book genres that people borrow depends on the type of borrower they are. So he needs a way of organizing data about books by the person who borrowed them and the genre of the book at the same time. And for Jose's data, the obvious choice is a contingency table. When we're working with probability, contingency tables help map out all the possible joint outcomes for 2 different variables. It's a similar thing with data like Jose's, where he has 2 categorical variables he wants to make sense of at the same time. The rows and columns take on the different category values, and each cell in our table consists of the number of counts of both kinds of categories. In Jose's table, if he follows the row labeled mystery/thriller and the column marked senior, he can read off that 20 books in that genre were borrowed by senior members last month. Nothing says retirement like some Gillian Flynn. This table also has the totals for each column and row on the very right and bottom, as well as a grand total in the lower right-hand corner, which just counts up all of the data points. One way to think about this is that each column is a frequency distribution of the book genres borrowed by a particular group. Like Jose could visualize the genre of books borrowed by the adult members in a normal bar graph. He could also do this the other way around and check out the frequency of members who are checking out romance novels. And, drumroll, with just this simple exercise, Jose's already on the cusp of 2 new and shiny chi-square tests. First, let's tackle Jose's question about whether different groups of library users have different trends in genres they're borrowing. borrowing. What Jose basically wants to know is if the frequency distributions for any two columns are actually different from each other. That would mean that the distribution across genres depends on the types of members doing the borrowing. Remember, the null hypothesis always assumes the status quo, so we assume there's no difference between the types of borrowers and try to reject that. We already have a statistical test for distinguishing a frequency distribution against this kind of null hypothesis, the chi-square test. Remember, it measures whether a frequency distribution is significantly different to some null hypothesis distribution. For a single group of variables, this comes down to comparing each frequency value across the categories in the data to some other theoretical distribution. But things change when there's two variables in the mix, and we want to know if they're related in some way. For that, we need the chi-square test of independence. With a single variable, the null hypothesis is some assumption about what a frequency distribution might look like and whether it really does. For the test of independence, the null hypothesis is going to describe what the whole contingency table would look like if there was no dependence between the categories, which is what we'll compare our real contingency table to. The math looks pretty similar, except instead of comparing the values for every value of one variable, we're comparing values across pairs of variables in the null hypothesis and the real data. To perform our test on a contingency table with two variables to see if they're independent, we calculate the chi-square statistic between each cell of this table and the expected values from the null hypothesis. To get those values, we first have to calculate what the values would look like under the null hypothesis. That's like imagining what the numbers in each cell would look like if the frequency distributions were proportionally the same in each column. Nothing would change as we looked at different membership groups. The basic idea is using the expected probability of what values you'd find in each cell if the two variables are independent. If you want to dive into the math, there's some resources for you in the description. As for Jose and the rest of us, software has us covered. With his data organized in Google Sheets, Jose copies over the row and column headings into a new block of cells. Starting with the upper left-hand corner of the data, he types equals followed by sum product, all as one word in capital letters, followed by a parenthesis. Now inside the parentheses, there's two cell references separated by a comma. The first one is a reference to the cell with the total for that row, while holding the column fixed using a $sign. The part after the comma in the parentheses is the opposite, referencing the total for that column and fixing the row with a $sign. Then outside the parentheses, we divide the whole thing by the grand total, the lower right-hand cell that describes the total number of data points, fixing both the row and column with $signs. That gets us the null hypothesis value for a single cell of data. But we're actually basically done. All we have to do is drag the formula in that cell using the little blue dot in the corner across all the rows and then across all of the columns. Those $signs that we put in so carefully means that we'll get the correct formula into every cell just by dragging it across. What we have now is the null hypothesis distribution for us to perform our chi-square test with. Jose decides on a significance threshold of 1%, which is pretty common. Then in another cell, he types equals followed by CHISQ, a period, followed by test in capital letters, and a parenthesis. This time, the first part in the parentheses specifies the range of the original data excluding the totals, and then a comma followed by the new range of data we just calculated corresponding to the null hypothesis. This handles all of the heavy lifting and pops out a p-value. In Jose's case, this value is so small it renders in Google Sheets as just 0. The upshot of all of this is, as Jose suspected, the distribution of genres really does differ quite a lot between membership types at Markov Meadow Library. That helps enormously with his quest to stock up only the most appealing and addictive books for the neighborhood. Still, that's just one library, and Jose knows that each library has a different mix of users. But rather than do the same analysis again for every library, he cuts to the chase and investigates the overall trends in genre across each library, which is pretty amazing if you think about it. Imagine doing that for an entire state. Just like before, he pulls up a contingency table, each row representing a genre and each column now representing a different library. Jose's hypothesis is still that the distribution of frequencies of book genres from library to library will be different. And in fact, even though the data are now completely different, the whole process we just walked through to test that hypothesis actually looks looks identical to the one we need to perform. But they are not exactly the same. In the world of statistics, they're considered different things. In the first case, Jose was looking at a single population, the people who come to a particular library. Within that population, he studied how two different categorical variables about that same population, the type of memberships they have and the genre of books they borrow, were related to each other. Now we're looking at something else. Jose's question is actually about whether different populations, the users at totally separate libraries, have the same distribution of borrowing across genres. This second situation, where we want to compare these same categories for different populations, is a chi-square test called a test of homogeneity. The assumption here is that the distribution for each group or population is sampled totally separately from each other. The math, however, works out the same because the null hypothesis is still that the distribution for every column is proportionally identical. Once again, if you look at the distribution of genres borrowed for each individual library, things wouldn't change that much from library to library. So, working through the same spreadsheet formulas as before, Jose conducts the test, only this time he gets a p-value of 0.75. That is way above the threshold for significance, and so he fails to reject the null hypothesis, which said that the frequency distribution of book genres borrowed across all the libraries is actually very similar. He doesn't have enough evidence to say that the distributions of book genres borrowed across all the libraries are actually different. That's a pretty big deal. Despite everything he learned about the different users at Markov Meadow, statistics tells him he can get away with managing the mix of books stocked in each library and the recommendations for different librarians in pretty much the same way. That's a huge time saver. Together, the chi-square tests for independence and homogeneity, despite their ridiculously long names, are also ridiculously handy. For instance, they're helping Jose assemble the perfect book displays for 7 libraries that are about to have sky-high checkout rates. But these tests have also cut Jose's workload dramatically. And they can also be helpful in many other ways across many fields, like comparing the disease rates among different groups of people, or the share of the economy made up by sectors in different countries. In practice, getting these kinds of tests mixed up won't affect the outcome, because the math, to be clear, looks identical between the two of them, so everything shakes out just fine. But the sign of a more sophisticated statistician is being crystal clear on what kinds of questions you're asking and the kinds of data you're interrogating. As for Jose, having drastically reduced his workload, he's in for a treat. Nothing is standing between him and hours rereading his favorite Emily Henry book. At long last. If you're enjoying this series and are interested in taking the full Study Hall Real-World Statistics course and earning college credit from ASU, check out gostudyhall.com or click on the button to learn more. And if you want to help us out, give this video a like, smash that subscribe button, and comment your favorite author. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.